Good morning.
Good morning.
So I asked for topics, and unfortunately I didn't get too many topics this morning. Our wonderful Vietnamese cook has returned, so we have some curry this morning, as she pointed out, my favorite. And but I did get a couple of topics, and those that listen online, because there's some, because we put it up on YouTube, please keep those cardinal letters coming. Remember Dean Martin and his show? Keep those cardinal letters coming in. If you have a topic you want me to talk about, let me know. If you actually want me to remember that topic, if you write it down on a piece of paper and hand it to me, I will. Otherwise, it's up in the air whether I actually remember it. I just got done spending yesterday most of the day replacing faucets in the bathroom sink. And they were pretty decent faucets. They'd lasted over 20 years. And at first I thought maybe I could go in and I could, repair them. Remember the good old days when a faucet was no more complicated than the hose bib on the side of your house, and you turned the water off and you took a nut off of there and pulled everything out and replaced a washer that cost you 5 cents, put it all back together, and everything worked just great. Anybody live in houses where you had faucets in your sinks like that? I did. He didn't, but I did, because when I was young, we lived in old houses. And I thought I was a pretty good plumber, because when the faucet would leak and leak and leak and leak, I'd just go to the hardware store down in Long Beach called Dooley's, which had one of everything and 10 of some other things, and spend a nickel and come back and fix it up, and I was a hero for the day. What I'm talking about is impermanence. Even though those things were made well, and the faucets at the side of your house are made pretty well, although we have one here, I have yet to figure out why it always leaks. I went and bought a brand new faucet head and put it on the pipe, and it still leaks. And I don't know what it is. It must be magic, because it should not leak, not a brand new one. I have a student in Washington. He has a number of businesses going there, and part of what he's doing is a small temple, but he has a lot of other things going on, a bed and breakfast and an organic farm, and these things. And last year we were able to have a meeting. We didn't have it this year because of the pandemic, but my students over the last few years, they will come together here at the temple, usually in April, first week of April, and we have, last year we had 19 monks and nuns here. And we kind of teach each other, and I have them teach each other. I give one presentation on one day, and then I kind of guide them. And I talked to them over a year ago about the fact that most of the American Zen centers, and that's usually what they're called, a Zen center, do not teach Buddhism. And you may not agree with that. That's okay. You can disagree with me. But as far as I'm concerned, most of them are teaching meditation, but they're not, because of course that's what Zen means. It's a Japanese word that means dhyana, which is the Sanskrit word which means meditation. And we're just one school within Buddhism. And so I talked to them a bit about that. I talked a bit about the conduct of monks and nuns, but I pointed out something that I had become aware of, that in America, again, most of the places that teach meditation do not teach Buddhism. They might refer to the Buddha. They might say, oh, the Buddha, he meditated every day, therefore. And that's how I began, when I converted to Buddhism at the ripe old age of 15. and had a spontaneous conversion by simply reading a book. I'd never seen a monk or a nun or a priest or a minister in the service of Buddhism. The thing that caused me to convert to Buddhism was reading. First I read a little bit about the life of the Buddha, and then I read his enlightenment. And the way his enlightenment was described in that book was because he was looking for the cause of suffering and unhappiness and misery that is part of being alive. And his awakening revealed to him the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And the Four Noble Truths were that life is filled with unhappiness. We have a technical term in Sanskrit, dukkha, and dukkha means a number of things. It doesn't mean a thing, it means a number of things. It does mean suffering, which Buddhists are famous for. I've seen posters. When I worked at a high school, one of the counselors had a poster quoting the Buddha saying life is suffering. The Buddha never said that. The Buddha said life is filled with dukkha. And dukkha can be suffering, it can be dissatisfaction, it can be discontent, it can be malaise, it can be, you can use a whole lot of words to describe it. It is not a catastrophic event, okay? It doesn't mean your house burned down, it doesn't mean that your life partner died, it doesn't mean that a child died. These things are terrible things in our lives and we suffer greatly with them. That's not what it means. It means that life is full of discontent. Discontent can be going out to eat and you have your favorite dish, cheese enchiladas, and it arrives, one of my favorite dishes, it arrives and it's cold. So I've always been very bad about this. Even though Tom Mung might disagree that I don't complain, because you can see I'm hooked up to oxygen and that's helping me not complain so much, because when you're short on oxygen, you're a pain in the neck to everybody around you, let me tell you. And I even know that I'm a pain in the neck when I'm a pain in the neck. But one of the things I've always been bashful about is if I go out to eat. I did not grow up in a family that we ever went out to eat. But later on I had a little money and I'd go out and they'd bring me cold soup and I'd go, oh, thank you so much. And I'd eat the cold soup. And I'd eat the cold enchilada. And then I had a friend who said, is that warm? No. Hey, come here. You need to heat that up. His dinner's cold. And I go, well, don't make a big deal out of it. But that was just my personality. I was pretty doggone shy. And I'm still kind of bad. You know, they bring me something that should be really hot and it's kind of room temperature and I go, well, at least it didn't just come out of the freezer, you know. I guess I can eat this the way it is. But there are some people that are just unhappy all the time. You know, the food isn't just quite perfect. It's a little, the temperature is a little too hot, a little too cold. The spices are a little too hot, they're a little too bland. The cheese is not quite the right cheese. The pasta was overcooked. It goes on and on and on. It's amazing what people can decide to be unhappy about in their lives. The Buddha realized this, and that was the first noble truth, that life is filled with dukkha. The second noble truth is that the cause of dukkha, there's a cause for it. And that cause is that we don't want things to change. We want things to be permanent. That's what the talk is about. If we label this talk, we label it impermanence. Got to make sure. We have a number of talks on YouTube that have no label. I don't know why anybody would listen to them, except they just have a lot of time to kill. And, well, we'll see what he's talking about today. Oh, he talked about that the last time. But the Buddha said impermanence is really the problem. And then, now, there's many ways of interpreting what he said. and this is my particular way. Impermanence is the problem. And the reason impermanence is the problem is because we are attached to things as they are. And that's the second noble truth. And the third noble truth is, but there's a solution to the problem. And the solution is the fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path. Now that's pretty straightforward, and when I read it at the age of 15, and you've got to understand, I had an IQ test and they said, yeah, you're a little bit above average. Nobody said I was a genius, and nobody said, well, you better start making reservations at Harvard because you're so smart, they're just going to give you a full scholarship. No, nobody said anything like that, but when I read that, okay, life is full of unhappiness. There's a cause of unhappiness. Sounds like good science to me, right, Larry? And we've got a solution to this problem, and the solution of the problem is don't work a job that you hate. As a high school teacher years ago, I used to tell kids, it's not about how much you make at the job, even though the counselors will tell you that. It's not about what you make at the job, even though your mom will tell you she wants you to be a doctor. This is Vietnamese. The Vietnamese culture. Doctor, lawyer, not too good. Pharmacist, okay. One more, what's missing? Doctor, lawyer,
nurse,
pharmacist. That's it.
dentist.
Everything else you failed in life. So, but the Buddha said, right, livelihood is really important. And we do it in a very gross sense. We say, well, a butcher. You don't want to be a butcher because you have to take life. In the old days, the butcher actually had to kill the animal before it butchered it. Then later on it got sophisticated. There was one guy that was paid to come in and kill the animal and another guy butchered it. That's cultural. But the thing is, you don't want to do that job. Why don't you want to do that job? Well, and this is me bird walking away from impermanence. The reason why you don't want to do that job is not because you're taking a life. And I know that's hard for people to accept, but it's not because you're taking a life. Because I have consistently all my life wearing this robe have taught people that the taking of a life causes a great deal of unhappiness, but not for the person who's dead. By definition, when you're dead, you stop suffering. Now, the majority of Buddhists in the world believe that in the notion of rebirth. So when you're dead, then later on you come back and you start over again. So it's not the big bad thing that it is in other religions or cultures or philosophies that when you're dead, oh, the old Jewish thing was, you're gone. That's it. It's over with. Going to bury you in the ground. You're done. No, you get to start over again as a cockroach or as a bird or a lizard or something like that. Or maybe even a cow that gets butchered for hamburgers. Who knows? No, the reason why butcher's job is not a great job, although a lot of Buddhists back in the good old days have accepted that idea. There are cultures within the Buddhist world where butchers are outcasts. Even though we don't believe in the whole system where we have outcasts, they're outcasts because they deal with the dead and cause death. That's not the thing. What happens to your heart when you spend all day chopping up bodies and killing things? You're probably not the most sensitive person on the block, because if you're doing that and you're really sensitive, you'd be crying the whole time you were doing it, wouldn't you? It would be tearing you up inside that you had to do this. Talk to any vegetarian, particularly the religious type vegetarian. I don't mean religious that they're Catholic and they're vegetarian. I mean that their religion is vegetarianism. I have a friend that's like that. He's a vegan. And to be a vegan really is to adopt a new religion. Okay, it's founded on the notion of ahimsa, which is something that Buddhism is founded on. Ahimsa, doing no harm. And that's where the problem with being a butcher comes in, is doing this harm that causes you to have a calloused heart that you no longer feel for those things around you. You don't feel for life. It should bother you. You know, one of the ongoing questions is if your house is infested with cockroaches. Larry asks me questions like this on a regular basis. So then what do? Well, you have to accept responsibility for killing the cockroaches. But since cockroaches spread disease, most people will say we have to get rid of the cockroaches. But you still have to accept responsibility for killing the cockroaches. Say a little prayer for the cockroaches. I do. I hope you're born as something other than a cockroach the next time around. So my student and my friend who has multiple businesses in a little temple in Washington, he was at this retreat where I was talking about, well, Buddhism is really not taught at meditation centers. And we can really see this because a popular form of meditation now, which is directly out of the Buddha, there's a short sutra. We have them in our library if you want to borrow it. It's not very long, and it talks about mindfulness meditation. And this is a real popular thing. It's all across America now. I get people sending me emails going, oh, they're teaching mindfulness meditation in the classrooms in New Jersey. Of course, what's actually happening is the teacher saying, okay, I want you guys to actually be quiet for 10 minutes. Yeah, just be quiet. Now that you're being quiet, try just to not think of anything. Just follow your breath. Let's get calmed down. I know you had a good time on the playground, but it's time to calm down because we're going to do a little math. Your favorite topic. So let's calm down. So this is all across America, and they've stripped Buddhism out of it. I briefly heard a fellow talking about that, one of the many, many Vipassana teachers, who probably also holds a degree in psychology. They seem to go together real easily. And he talked about, well, you know, Buddhism was off-putting. So we took Buddhism out of this. He actually admitted it. I got to hear a Vipassana teacher admitting what they'd done. We took Buddhism out of it because then people would do the meditation. Meditation is good. Doctors teach meditation. Psychologists teach meditation. It's a good way to calm down and be quiet. Doesn't necessarily make you happy in your life, but it's a good thing to do every day in your life. Because our misery comes from impermanence. It doesn't come from a lack of meditation. It comes from impermanence. It does not come from a lack of paying attention. People, if you hang around with me here at the Zen Center, you're going to get tired of me telling you to pay attention. I do it all the time. Mung actually has told people that he's learning from me because I keep telling them to pay attention. But the reality is we suffer and we're unhappy and we experience discontent because things get old and break. Things wear out. My body is a classic example. A couple days ago, I was 75 in America and 76 in the Orient. Some people would say perhaps things are starting to wear out. I went to the doctor 3 weeks ago. He looked me in the eye and he said, I don't think your heart problem is your heart. I think your heart problem, which I have a couple of, is your lungs. Because he checked my oxygen and it was 78% and he felt that was unacceptable. since they'll let you in the hospital if you have below 90%. And he said, I believe this is what your problem is. And I went, well, you know, I'm a tough guy. I was a paratrooper and all of that, you know, and I used to be able to do this and that. And he said, that's nice. I think your problem is your oxygen level. And you need to be on oxygen all the time. And I went, well, you know, I got off the oxygen. I'm able to do this and that. He goes, that's nice. But still, I think the reason you keep going, I have AFib, one of the things I have. He says, I think they're 50% now. For a while it was 100%. Then I came out of it for a couple of weeks. So he said, you know, 50%. He says, for the next 3 months, I want you on oxygen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, period. Non-negotiable. This is one of the easiest going doctors in the world. He actually asks me my opinion of things sometimes. You know, he'll say, how do you feel? I feel good. You look good. Okay, we got that taken care of. I used to go in to see him. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. Go home. He didn't do that this time. He said, I want you on oxygen 24 hours a day. I'm going to have another x-ray of your lungs. I think it's in your lungs. I don't think it's in your heart. He said, you know, oxygen, if you don't have enough oxygen, it causes you to go out of rhythm. First anybody told me that. And he says, I think this is the problem. So we're gonna look at your x-rays in a month, and then I'm gonna have you back in 3 months, and we're gonna check your pacemaker, and we're gonna find out if you've stayed in rhythm. You know, it's kind of hard to accept the fact that you're getting older and things aren't working as well as they should be working. It's kind of hard to, I've accepted the fact of impermanence. You know, I've accepted that a long time ago. I believe in impermanence. I see it all around me. I had to replace a faucet, the faucets on a sink yesterday. It just wore me out. I was so tired when I went to bed because I was laying in a space that was about that big, trying to get this thing apart, and it didn't want to come apart, and I had to cut things and break things to get it out of there so I could put new faucets in. And I was up and down and up and down, and where's that tool, and up and down and over and over and over, and I'm thinking, I don't have to go to the gym today. Not that the gym has been open for the last 4 months, but boy was I tired when I finally went to bed. It's really hard to accept the fact that I can work in the morning, and if I try to work in the afternoon, it's all over with. This has been going on for 10 years. If I go out and work hard in the morning for 3 or 4 hours, I better take it easy in the afternoon. Maybe vacuum, read a good book, plan a talk, which I never do, by the way, and all those kinds of things. Because if I go out and work an 8-hour day like I used to be able to do, I'm just totally useless the next day. Mom's the same way, and he's a kid. Mom just turned 50, did you know that? Yeah, we had a cake and everything. He's now over the hill. Yeah, the hill's got a big 50 on top of it. Like the Hollywood sign, it's a big 50. So, I tell everybody, I've announced to people, I'm okay, don't get worried, I've got oxygen on, it doesn't mean I'm dying. If I'm in the hospital and I got it on, maybe. But I've come out of denial, and I'm accepting the fact that this is just the way it's going to be, because I really respect this doctor. And he didn't give me any outs. He said, this is what I want, period. We don't want to accept that sort of things. You know, faucets wear out. Toilets break. Microwaves have to be replaced. Cars do not last forever. You know, the first half of my life I was a mechanic. That's what we called ourselves back then. By the time I had retired, I was a master automotive technician, certified in 8 areas. Yeah, automotive technician. back when I started working on cars, you know how often you had to go in and overhaul the engine, or at least do a valve job? At 80 or 90,000